You know, there are real criminals out on the street. They're arresting Tamara, flying her back to Ottawa for some hearing. I mean, do we have nothing better to spend money on in this country than persecuting peaceful protesters? Are there no murderers and rapists and drug dealers that the police and the government can go after? This is such a miscarriage of justice. Like somebody has said, you know, we don't have a justice system in this country. We have a legal system, and that's the problem. You know, we need to restore righteousness to justice.
Dozens and dozens of people here have arrived outside of the Medicine Hat Remand Centre, of course, after Tamara Lich was arrested again, allegedly for breaching her bail conditions. Now, you might have already heard that name before. Tamara Lich, she was one of the convoy organizers, and while she was in Ottawa doing what I think most Canadians would consider a historical thing, something that united Canadians from coast to coast to coast, as our Prime Minister would say, well, she was been arrested and she was held for 18 days, given a set of conditions upon her release, and after her release, she has now been arrested again, allegedly for breaking the bail conditions that were set upon her. And as you can see outside, there are dozens and dozens of supporters that have come out, some of them behind me right now, and they're here to show their support for Tamara Lich and to say that this decision that the government has made and that the police here in Medicine Hat have made, that the police in Ottawa have made, was the wrong decision. And we're going to hear from these guys today.
Well, you know, what we've seen the last 2 years is really an unprecedented violation of our charter freedoms in so many ways. Tamara's arrest, I think, is a wake-up call. We can't be complacent. We can't be apathetic. You know, the future of our country is really at stake. You know, freedom of peaceful assembly, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, all of these things are charter rights. And yet, this is what Tamara is in jail for. She is a political prisoner. We need to stand up against what's happening in this country. When we sing O Canada, we do two things. First of all, we pray, God keep our land glorious and free. But we also take a pledge. We say, and we stand on guard for thee. And that's what we're doing here today. We're standing on guard for our country. And that's what we need to do. We need to call Canadians to stand up, to stand on guard for thee.
Tamara, I've been part of the convoy and supporting Tamara since this thing started. She's doing a good job for Canada. She's a great patriot. And a freedom fighter. It's all about freedom.
I came out to support Tamara. I don't know her personally, but I don't like what's happened to her, Pastor Hart, and all of Canada, really.
Well, I come out all the time for these rallies because we're going to lose our entire country if we don't start standing up. I mean, now it's becoming dire. We've got political prisoners in jail without due process. It's both.
I've known Tamara for quite some time. I worked with her on the anti-tax, the fuel tax protests a couple of years ago, and she's a real quality person and full of integrity. And I believe that she has done a very positive job in representing Canadian values.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that the bail conditions were probably quite harsh and deliberately so. I think that they were demonstrating that they wanted to enforce whatever provisions with an iron fist. And I think given the circumstances with the way that our federal government has really disgraced themselves in their handling of the protest, I think it is really quite ironic that they're coming down on Tamara the way that they are. We should be focusing on the ministers that were responsible for invoking and enforcing the Emergencies Act without any appropriate reason.
That guy that ran over those people in Winnipeg was out on bail the next day. He was some kind of fundamentalist. And Tamara is on the charge of mischief for peaceful protests in our nation's capital. Does that not sound pretty darn bogus to you?
Am I surprised? Not at all. Is Tamara surprised? Unfortunately, not at all. This is 100% political, and where it goes from here, who knows? Because I don't see it getting better.
I'm sure once she has to go through the government hoops, they'll find out nothing was done, nothing was wrong. She was allowed to go to the Freedom Award, so if they want to nitpick her to death, well, she's as strong, if not stronger than them.
It's ridiculous. It's a whole bunch of overreach by our government, That's tyrannical in the true meaning of the word tyrannical.
What the government is doing, and especially some of the politicians in Ontario, I think it's a travesty, and I think that Canadians need to stand up and need to speak out that we're not going to tolerate these abuses of our freedom any longer.
I got a fractured collarbone. I got bruising on I got sore ribs. Doesn't look like I'll be driving anytime soon.
Peace, love, unity, freedom, free Tamara Lich. What do you mean by that?
That was our motto through the whole convoy, was peace, love, unity, and freedom. It was the largest, most peaceful rally in the entire world. There was nothing illegal. There was no violence except on behalf of the government. That's what Tamara stood for, and that's what we all stood for. Tamara was one of a huge group of people that organized this from the very, very beginning. Tamara's only involvement, different than thousands of other people, was her live videos from the very beginning touched the souls of tens of thousands of Canadians. They connected with her. She is the most kind, caring, compassionate, loving person. She would give you the shirt off her back, and people were drawn to that because of who Tamara is as a person. That's the only reason that she became front and center, was because there was hundreds of people who were involved in the movement doing lives, but she connected on a very primal level with all the Canadians that were hurting.
The convoy to Ottawa, that was an inspiration for millions across the country. What was the biggest takeaway, the biggest thing that was achieved by the convoy?
It helped wake me up and start doing some investigating as I see what Canada is becoming. So it did start a movement in American convoy and across the world. It really helped to wake a lot of people up. And this kind of thing going to keep building, I think.
It woke a lot of people up across Canada, brought them all together. All the people, all the provinces as they went across, everybody was cheering them on, made Canada come together more as a united Canada against this tyrannical government.
Not only in Canada, but worldwide, it made people wake up to the fact that silence is consent, and that we need to peacefully protest at every opportunity and tell the government how we feel.
I think it gave people hope, because people were so divided and demoralized and hopeless and distraught, and when the truckers started going to Ottawa, all of a sudden people had hope, because somebody was standing up for them, somebody was speaking, because people felt like they had no voice, they had no representation. The politicians weren't representing the people, the courts weren't representing the people, the media weren't representing the people, and sometimes, the Lord uses the weak to shame the strong, and so we have truckers standing up for Canadians when politicians, courts, and the media would not.
The people here, we're down to earth, we're salt of the earth. We don't mean, we're not attempting to overthrow the government. We're simply attempting to, draw light to our concerns about how our freedoms have been eroded, especially over the past couple of years of the pandemic. And we have a right to be heard. Politicians have a responsibility to listen to the people, and the attitude that, especially that many of the politicians have taken, I think has been outrageous. We have a right to be heard. We have a right to be listened to, and the government does not have the responsibility of attempting to quash, every protest that comes along.
There are people who are deliberately trying to stir up hate and intolerance and misinformation. And we do need to call out those folks, even as we continue to do everything we can to reach out in thoughtful, reasonable ways to people who do have worries or concerns, and focus on allaying those worries and concerns. The way through this pandemic is by getting everyone vaccinated. And the overwhelming majority, close to 90% of Canadians, have done exactly that. The small fringe minority of people who are on their way to Ottawa or who are holding unacceptable views that they're expressing do not represent the views of Canadians who have been there for each other, who know that following the science.
What has to happen? Well, I mean, I'd like to see this obviously go to court and have the charges against her ruled unconstitutional, illegal. These bail conditions are ridiculous. And the money, there are real criminals out on the street. They're arresting Tamara, flying her back to Ottawa for some hearing. I mean, do we have nothing better to spend money on in this country than persecuting peaceful protesters? Are there no murderers and rapists and drug dealers that the police and the government can go after? This is such a miscarriage of justice. Like somebody has said, we don't have a justice system in this country. We have a legal system, and that's the problem. We need to restore righteousness to justice.
Well, she's going back to Ottawa or back to Ontario, and she's going to, face whatever terms are being described in the court order. I hope that she's freed. I think that many Canadians are praying for her and praying for her quick release. But I think that the more that the government attempts to stamp out and drown the voices of Canadians, the more Canadians are going to wake up. So I think that this is going to actually do more to benefit the cause of freedom in this country than anything. And so in many respects, it's a win-win for the people in our freedom movement.
Released and all the charges dropped. And apologies to all the Canadian people for the fact that we have been denied our right to peaceful protests. What the hell is this country coming to?
I think she needs to be just free out there, living her life, because she's a good person.
Well, if she gets her day in court, maybe once and for all, we'll get this going. And if they want to bring her in earlier and not wait around for 3 years on probation, we're all for that. She can have her words and have her lawyers say what they got to say and do and bring up and show what they have to, again, find that this is BS.
Definitely, Tamara should be freed. Is Tamara willing? Tamara has told me personally she is willing to pay whatever cost, that she did absolutely nothing wrong. My only prayer is if she has to pay a higher price for absolutely nothing, that something incredibly positive comes out of it at the end for Canada and for Canadians, because that's all she ever wanted.
She never should have been arrested for speaking freely. Freedom of speech they take away, freedom of assembly. They probably want to shut this down. Freedom of movement. You can't go across provincial borders or across into the United States or wherever. Total police state they want to bring in.
I'm wondering, I have a question. You ask yourself out there, who is the real villain? It's not Tamara.
Out of Alberta, right? So we went up with Pat King, and this is bullshit what's going on here right now. How long you guys been down here?
We've been here since yesterday.
Yeah? We're gonna give some jakes up here, okay? You betcha, buddy. We're gonna rock it. Love Rebel. Love Rebel. Let's get Tamara free to Pat. Enough of this freedom. We need the freedom, right?
If you're like some of the people behind me and you think that Tamara Lich shouldn't be behind bars right now, probably shouldn't have been arrested in the first place, well, you got to go to freetamara.ca to sign the petition to have her released. For Rebel News, I'm Sydney Fazard. You mentioned just now, actually, that you started watching Rebel News, I guess, sort of around the time the convoy was happening. Yep. What made you flick the switch?
Just doing investigations, and you came across Ezra Levant, Rebel News, and True North, and started investigating some of these last free media in Canada, mainstream media. I don't even watch TV anymore, just government propaganda. So it's nice to see some free media here reporting what's really going on.
Like I said, join the tens of thousands of people who have already signed on. And I should mention that even from the time that we handed that off to now, the petition's already increased. It's well over 25,000. I think it's approaching 30 now, might even be more than that by the time you see this video. And if you want to add your name to that list and show the people who are in charge of arresting innocent Canadians that what they're doing doesn't align with the general consensus of the community, of the population, well, then you got to go to freetamara.ca.